In his FAQs for the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy, McDowell said that he saw the ideal audience for the trilogy as people who were 18 when they saw the original Star Wars movies and are now the same age as the characters in the books themselves, people in their 30s and 40s. Bantam Spectra released the adult line of Star Wars books, but the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy definitely feels like it's geared towards a more mature audience. And I'm not just talking about the probable prostitutes who work at a club that look like Jabba's palace. Shield of Lies made it to number 10 on the New York Times paperback bestseller list for the week of September 1st, 1996, and was ultimately on the list for 3 weeks. Honestly, I did not remember any of this book. I know I read it. I know that I read all 3 of the Black Fleet Crisis books, but none of this felt familiar to me. And on the Princess Leia costume count, which I have forgotten about for the past few books, she's wearing robes most of the time, but one occasion when she appears before the Defense Council, she's wearing some sort of jumpsuit leggings stitch. So, a brief summary. As Leia deals with a new threat to the fragile ties that bind the New Republic, Lando becomes trapped on the Quella spaceship, and Luke continues his quest for the Fal Nasi and for his mother. Now this book, unlike the previous one, is broken up into 3 parts. Lando's part 1, is 4 chapters. Luke's part 2, is 5 chapters. And Leia's part, the final part, is 6 chapters. So I thought it made more sense to take them section by section. So Lando. I am enjoying Lando's adventure, but it does feel superfluous to the overarching plot as a whole. This isn't helped by the fact that we get all of Lando's stuff at the beginning and then he's completely forgotten about for the rest of the book. It also felt drawn out in that, did we really need 4 chapters to cover everything that happened here? It could be basically summed up as Lando and co are stuck in the airlock, they get out of the airlock and move around a passageway that they realize is the weapons superconduit. They have some mishaps there, get out of that passage, and end up in a more habitable part of the ship. The Vagabond exits hyperspace and they're now in the deep core. They're attacked by an Imperial ship and the Vagabond blows up the Imperial ship. That's it. That's all that happens to Lando. The Black Fleet Crisis is affecting the other New Republic intelligence ships that were sent on the expedition. It ends with them all being recalled to the 5th Fleet in the Cornact cluster, except for Colonel Pacat, who decides to stay behind. But it just seems completely removed from the greater plot/threat that's happening. I like both the rapport and the conflict between Lando and his team, though. R2 and 3PO are very much on the logic side of things, being droids. And even Lobot, with his cybernetic implant, hews a lot more closely to the logic side than to Lando's human intuition side. And Lando's the leader, so when he makes decisions, if they don't go well, he's the one to blame. I also thought that this was a chance for us to see Lando at work. He's not just suave, he's also intelligent, and he's brave, and he's willing to think things through. And Lobot's getting some really good character development as well, and he's sort of becoming a more interesting person to read about. I also appreciate that Lando does snap at 3PO a few times, but he's not really nasty about it. He asks them to come, so yeah, they're useful to him. I think this would have worked really well as something like the Lando Calrissian Adventures, or even as an expedition that they go on in the new Lando comic. But yeah, not sure how well it works in the Black Fleet Crisis as a whole. And then we had Luke in the middle. At least he looked into her background this time, something that I wanted him to do in book 1, it just took him a while. But this was another one where not a lot happened, and I'm not sure we needed 5 chapters to cover all of this. Luke and Akana head to Tear, and then to Atzeri, only for, at the very end, Akana to reveal that they need to be heading to Jutupitan all along, that Hadzeri was not where they needed to go. But at least it seems that Jutupitan is in the Cornact cluster, so Luke probably, surely, but slowly will be drawn into that overarching conflict. I found this section really frustrating though, because so much of it is Akana reluctant to tell Luke what's going on, Akana outright not telling him what's going on, Akana saying that she wants to teach him about the white current, but then no progress is made on that front. And Luke putting up with this for far longer than I would have thought he would have. I still find the Falanasi interesting and I want to learn more about the white current, but the more non-information we get, the more my interest starts to wane. I also feel like Luke doesn't sound right. McDowell doesn't really get his voice and his inner thoughts down pat. There's not one particular thing that I can pinpoint here. It just felt like Luke's attitude and his snappy comebacks were something that I would expect to see from Han rather than from Luke. There's also a strange interlude on Atzeri where Luke has time to kill because Akana said, "Don't come and look for me unless 3 days have passed," while she's going off looking for her dad. And he goes to a trader and buys secret Jedi texts, which are obviously fakes. Guess he's bored. And then he goes to a club that's recreating Jabba's palace, which, number one, why would anyone want to go to anything like that? Number two, that just seems so niched. Go to Jabba's palace, sleep with a dancer, see the entertainment. And then apparently they have live shows with Leia pretending to be Bausch and Chewbacca and all that. And how does anyone know that? I would think that the general idea of what happened at Jabba's palace has probably gone through so many rounds of telephone that it's just completely skewed out of proportion to what really happened. So I can't buy that. We also get a return of Luke's Force skill, the Force illusion, where he makes himself look like someone else. And there's a little bit of elaboration there in that we learn he can't do it while he's sleeping, while he's unconscious. He has to be conscious to do it. I still feel, I'm gonna say this now, that it makes more sense for Luke to use the Force as a look away, like pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, than to actually physically change his appearance, especially because it seems like he can't change his voice, and I think that would be a giveaway, but However, there were a few things that I did like. I appreciated Akana calling out Luke when he immediately assumed that the men on Lukasek were Imperials when it was probably more likely that they were New Republic intelligence. Thank you. I too wondered that after book 1. I liked that Luke knows exactly how many people died on the Death Star. He regrets it. He feels responsible for their deaths, but at the same time, he has also come to believe and accept that it had to be done. He didn't want any more planets to be destroyed like Alderaan, and the rebellion had to make a stand. And I also liked confirmation that to leave Coruscant, you have to request permission to lift to orbit, as well as permission to get out of the planetary shield, because that was one thing that very much bothered me about Shadows of the Empire. But on the whole, Luke section, not my favorite. I don't want to say I suffered through it because it was only 5 chapters, but the fact that it was in the middle was a little tough. And then we have Leia. I liked Leia a lot more in Shield of Lies than I did in Before the Storm. I felt like she was actually making decisions, standing up for herself, not letting people walk all over her and misuse her. There's a great bit where all these planets in the Farlax sector, which is right by the Cornact cluster, or part of the Cornact cluster, I'm a little unclear now that I think about it, had requested to join the New Republic. And instead of letting it go through all these committees, she just sits down, gets a witness, and signs them all. And when the young man who fled from Polnai in Before the Storm wants to join the New Republic Navy, and he's denied because his planet isn't part of the New Republic, Leia signs that one off too. So So you go, Leia, just pushing people around. I also liked that we got to see a lot of basically how slow the New Republic is. McDowell has a point from Akbar's point of view where he talks about Leia had been the chief of state of the Provisional Council, but now she's the president of the Senate. So we have all these different cabinets and committees, and things have to be approved by something before it can move to here. So things happen slower. The Yevothan Purge happened in the last third of book 1, and when we open in Leia's section here, over 2 weeks have passed and there's still no progress on what the New Republic should do and can do. We also get a battle, and it doesn't go well. The Yevothan uses the New Republic's honor against them. When the K-Wing bombers are coming in to bomb the ships, they broadcast messages from hostages from the worlds that they took in the last book. And so many of the bombers just turn away. They say, I can't fire on innocent hostages. And it goes really badly for the New Republic. Leia's also having to deal with people trying to remove her from office. She's able to outmaneuver them for now, but at the very end, she gets another summons. Someone that she thought was an ally saying, Leia, you can't be in charge for this. You have to step down. If Leia comes into even more prominence and we get to see her doing her job in a competent manner, Han doesn't really have anything to do in this book. He's sort of filling the role that a girlfriend would fill in a book. He's babysitting, he's there. Leia assigns him to be Commodore of the Fifth Fleet, but on his way to the fleet, he's captured by the Deskin League, and things don't look good for him. He's essentially the damsel in distress now. I also like a lot of the world building that McDowell does with the New Republic government and with the Senate. It's not really used by any of the later writers, but it's really interesting that we have a speaker, sort of like the Speaker of the House. Makes a lot of sense. We've got all these different committees. We have the ruling committee. Their only job is basically to decide whether a president should be removed or not. And then we had a really good part in the beginning of chapter 15 where they sent all these recon flights to all the different worlds of the Deskin League to see what's going on. And it's almost like the situation rooms you have when they're launching an attack. They have all these screens, and in each one they see, oh my goodness, all these Imperial ships, oh no, and then one by one they go out. It's very exciting. Compared to book 1, we had a lot more action going on. But in a way, it was still just set up for, I assume, the big battle that will be in book 3, Tyrant's Test. We have a rout. We have the presumed death of all the recon pilots. We have Han's shuttle being captured by the Yevothan. But that's it. There's an awful lot of maneuvering and political discussions and political discourse. I didn't really like a lot of the military stuff going on in book 1. I do prefer sort of the political maneuverings that are going on in this one. And while there's still a lot of military stuff, descriptions of ships, it's easier for me to get past those to the things that I'm actually interested in. But I do have to say that I'm not sure why McDowell chose to structure the book the way he did. With Lando, Luke, and Leia's subplots so disconnected and fractured from each other, it's hard for me to put together like a timeline of what's happening when and where. Lando's bit seems very abbreviated because he's operating under the threat of running out of air and running out of water. So it seems to be a very short time span. But on the other hand, Luke and Akana spend literally days entering and leaving each planet's flight control zone. So their journey feels a bit more leisurely than the other sections. And in Leia's, it's also hard for me to know the timeline. We know that after the purge that happened in the last third of Before the Storm, that 16 or more days have expired before things start to happen. I just wish that there was a timeline that told me day by day who was where and what they were doing. maybe there's one online. Maybe I need to Google this. Does one exist? Because right now it's a little hard for me to wrap my head around how everything slots in place. I also find the Yevithan difficult to understand. I'm a little confused about their biology. Seems like there's an awful lot of blood going on. I think part of it was that so much about the Yevithan were concealed in book 1 because Nilspar didn't want the New Republic to know about them. But it's like, are they like reptiles? I don't know. He's got a bunch of breeding females and they just like kill lesser status males and like they need the blood to fertilize the eggs. I have no idea what is happening here. I sort of feel like the Imperial that Leia questions about the Yevithan, when it's just like, oh, blood, they kill people, and I really don't have a better grasp of them. And maybe just because recently I've been reading a lot of nonfiction about World War II, but the Yevithan gave me this vibe of how the US viewed the Japanese during World War II, that they're xenophobic, they're racist, they don't like other people to the point that they will purge them. They're colonizing and spreading their empire, and they're very good at technical things that they've picked up from others, and in this case that they've picked up from the Empire. So I guess sometimes in the Star Wars books, you'll have bad guys, but not all of them are bad, or rather that some of the bad guys you sympathize with and you're like, oh, well, they were just forced into this and they'll change their mind. I don't get any sense of that with the Yevithan. They're just completely evil. No redeeming qualities. Almost feel like terrorists or something in a Tom Clancy novel, that there's no way to reason with them. There's no way to work things out. They just love death and murder, and you'd be better off exterminating them. Which, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, these are people that call other people vermin, but at the same time, I don't want them all to die, but at the same time, they're really bad. I guess that's my problem, my moral dilemma. I have a hard time rooting for complete annihilation of bad guys because there's a part of me that's always wondering, well, there's probably one good Calorman. I'm sure there's one good Calorman. So, should you read Shield of Lies? Well, I think that if you read Before the Storm, it definitely makes sense to continue on. There's a little bit more excitement. It is still build up towards book 3. What I didn't like so much was the structure of the novel. I think it would have worked a lot better to have done it the same way that McDowell did book 1, which is, you know, just intersperse the 3 plot lines. That way, I don't feel in the middle like I'm suffering through obnoxious Luke things. So next, I'm going to be hopping back over to the X-Wing series with book 3, The Krytos Trap by Michael A. Stackpole.